video, we'll go over PowerPoint transitions, particularly morph and also animations. As a special bonus for those of you who are using Mac, I am using the Mac version of PowerPoint here, so it may be a little bit different from what you're used to. So morph is one of the transitions. We have several different transitions that we can use, and a good slideshow will only use a consistent transition, the same transition through each slides. When you pick a transition, you can see an example of what it's going to look like, so take a look at Reveal. Reveal slowly puts the images on the slide. If I chose Push, you would see that that would push up from the bottom. And I can go to Effect Options to choose which direction it's going to come from. All right, so what I want to show you is morph. Okay, if I put morph on this slide, that actually doesn't look any different than fade would look. Let's compare that to fade. It's just a little bit slower. Because morph only is powerful if you have matching elements on a slide. So let's take this slide, our first one, and I'm going to duplicate it. And to duplicate it, I can right click and choose duplicate, or I can do Control D if I'm on a Windows machine. And I'm of course control clicking here on the Mac to do that. All right, so here is my duplicate slide. Let's apply the morph transition to it. And again, transitions are on the transition menu. So we'll press preview, we'll see what that looks like. All right, so that looks not very different because we haven't made any changes. So I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to move this to here, and in fact, we'll go ahead and we'll move that there. Okay, so now let's see what happens. So you can see that they move into the new location. Now, if I, after duplicating this slide, change the slide design, we'll move to this. Let's again check what that morph is going to do. So it moves it to the new location. I am now going to create a new slide. Sorry, I want that to be here. And I'm also going to take my picture and I'll copy it and I'll move it over here. All right, let's apply the morph transition. And you can see again, that moves beautifully. Now, something for you to be aware of is that sometimes it won't notice that it's the same object and the morph won't work. So if for some reason morph is not recognizing that you have the same object on both slides, then you're going to do a trick using the selection pane. Now, if you can't find the selection pane, you can of course search for it. I am told, at least on the Mac, that if it's on the home ribbon under Arrange, you go down to Selection Pane. Let's turn that back on again. Okay, so there's my selection pane. It shows me all the objects that are on this slide that I can do things with. So if your morph is not working, you want to make sure that the object that you want to merge, in this case, it's going to be the text here, uses the same name as the same object, the matching object on the next slide. And if that still doesn't work, then you need to edit the name and put 2 exclamation points in front of it. Go on to your next slide and do the same thing. And then that should be enough to let PowerPoint know that it is the same object and your morph will work. All right, so let's look at some ways that morph can be really useful and powerful and an alternative to doing animations. So here I have a map. This is a good way to show how it can be really helpful to use morph. I'm showing a map of Hawaii, and now I want to move in on individual islands. So I'm going to duplicate this slide, and now I'm going to take this, go to picture format, and crop it. And instead of moving the cropping handles, I am going to take the sizing handles, and I'm going to pull this until I have just the island of Oahu. I'm using the sizing tool, the zoom tool down here, so that I can see all of that, and I want to resize inside this box until all I have is the island of Oahu. There's my original map, and there is the same map but zoomed in. So now I'm going to apply morph, and you can see that it automatically zooms into Oahu. And now I'm going to duplicate that, take the same map, picture format, crop again, and I'm going to move this over until what we have is the big island, as they call it, of Hawaii. So now we're going to apply morph to this. It should already be there. Yes, morph is already there. So let us preview our morph, and you can see it moves there. Now I probably actually want to have, duplicate this again, probably want to have the big map in between those. So let's make sure that I apply morph to each one of these. So I've applied morph to them, and now let's run the slideshow. Go to current slide. So it begins with the full map of Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands. I move to the next slide, and it zooms in on the island of Oahu, which is where the capital, Honolulu, is. And now, because I used morph on all these slides, when I go to the next slide, it will zoom out and again show us all of the Hawaiian Islands. And when I click again, it'll zoom in to the island of Hawaii. And if I go back, again, it zooms out and we can see all of them. So this feature is really, really helpful for things like a map where you want to move people around. So now I'm going to show you another way that this could be useful. I am going to use picture format to do a quick style. My menu is a little bit different here on the Mac, and I want to choose this, which I hope looks a little bit like a phone. Make those edges less round. And I'm going to crop it. I could actually take a picture of a phone and put it in here. I'm too lazy to do it in this case. So we'll just have those bars. All right, so now I hope that kind of looks like a phone. And it's a phone that shows a map of Hawaii. We're going to duplicate this slide. And in this one, I'm again going to go to picture format, choose crop, and now I can move it. So in this case, we're going to swipe in this direction to show us the island of Kauai. And then I'll duplicate this one. And here, we're going to go back to crop. I'll slide this over. And we will see Maui there, in case you wondered where Maui is. All right, let's make sure that we have morph on these two slides. Right, and we will go back to our slideshow, play from current slide. So here is my slide that more or less has a phone on it. And with this feature now, it can look like I'm swiping on my phone. That direction to see Kauai, and then to show you where Maui is. So animations have been around longer than morph in PowerPoint, and it lets you do a lot of powerful stuff that now you can do more easily in morph. But sometimes you may want to use animations. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to begin by getting something to animate, which is going to be an icon of a sun. Make it the size I want. And in graphics format, I can go to graphics fill and I can make it yellow. So now I have my yellow sun. All right, so I want to animate this so that it can move around the screen. So I will take my sun, I will go to the animation menu. The first thing that I want it to do is I want it to appear. So when I start on this slide, I don't want anyone to see the sun. And I could have it just suddenly appear. I'm going to do something that's a little bit more subtle, and that is the fade in. And so that was kind of a fast fade in. Over here on duration, I can make that last a little bit longer. Let's preview that. So I have a nice slow fade in. Okay, this is the really important, powerful thing to use when doing animations. Use the animation pane. The animation pane shows me everything on the slide that has been animated, and they'll have little numbers that match. I only have one animation so far. I can do multiple animations for one object. Now, I believe on Windows, if you select another animation, it will replace it rather than create a second animation. So you will need to choose Add Animation over here, which we don't see here on the Mac version. But I'm going to do a path animation now. So I'm going to choose Lines, and that does add a second animation, and it's moving down. I don't want it to move down. I'll choose Effect Animations to say I want it to move to the right. And it doesn't quite move as far as I want it to, so I can click on it and then grab this handle and move that over to the center. All right, so I have two animations. The first one is the fade that makes it appear, and the second one is the moving to the right. And that first one will happen on click. The second one will also happen on click. If I wanted to happen automatically, I would choose with previous. Let me talk about how that works. So if I do it on the first one, with previous means as soon as the slide opens, it will come in at the same time. After previous will mean the slide will appear and then it will automatically show up. And so that's the same thing with the movement. I can have the fade and the movement happening at the same time if I want, if I choose with previous. So let's see what that looks like. So it fades and it moves at the same time. All right, I want to add now a second movement. Select my object and I want to add a path animation, and it's going to be that way. And it's moving down. That's what I want. I want it to move a little bit further down. Okay. I have these two animations that are happening at the same time, so they both say one, and my third animation happens afterwards. And instead of doing on click, I'll just say after previous. So let's preview that. Ah, well, you see what it did. It didn't leave my graphic in the location that I wanted. So I am going to delete this one. I will use my morph instead. So I'm going to duplicate this slide and take my sun, move it here, and let's go ahead and look at the animation pane. I actually want to get rid of all of those animations. Move my sun where I want it to be. There we go. I have no animations. I do want to add one animation to this, which is going to be a fade out. So animation, exit effect, and this is going to be in a slightly different location on the PC. And we will choose fade. So this is a fade out as opposed to a fade in. All right. Finally, I want to make sure I have morph on that. Good. Okay. So let's start our slideshow. Play from current slide. All right, so here's our map. I'm going to click and the sun will appear and move over at the same time. That's my first slide using an animation. Now my second slide, the sun is going to move because of morph, and then it'll animate a fade out when I click. So you can do some of the same things with morph and animation. Morph, I think, is easier to use and more intuitive, although it does use more slides. but animation also gives you a lot of things that you can do pretty easily. So now I want to show you one more thing about animations, and this is probably the most useful one. Let's do a simple bullet slide. We are going to add an animation, and I'm going to do wipe from the left. So I choose wipe. By default, it's bottom up. I don't like that. I want effect options from the left. And notice that they appear, and by default, each one of my bullet points appear one at a time, which is really helpful for your audience following you. Now you may remember that I used that dim feature to animate the animals that cats eat on that first slideshow I showed you. I'm going to choose effect options, and if it was a PC I would click the down arrow next to this to get to effect options. And I'm going to choose after animation, dim, and we'll dim to that background color. All right, let's preview that. So it animates one at a time, and then it completely disappears because it's dimming to the background color. If I wanted that to be a little more visible, I would just have a low contrast color. Let's take a look at that. And then after my last one is done, I don't actually want it to dim at all. So if I open this, I will go down to 0.3, and I'm going to say don't dim. And now it looks like that. So that's a really, really helpful way to do a one bullet point at a time animation. And let's just quickly look at the slideshow I had about cats so that you can see how I did that animation. Here it is. We'll open the animation pane. So this sentence here has an appear transition that happens on click, so that first the slide comes up with just the background, the picture of the cat, and companions or killers. Then picture 5, which is this one, is our second animation. There's our third animation, our fourth animation, and our fifth animation. And I have set it up so that it dims to this green color afterwards. And let's look again at what happens there. All right, there it's showing me automatic. We'll just step you through that. Slideshow, play from current slide. Here's how it starts. That was a particular transition we'll look at in a minute. I click, my text appears. I click, my first image appears. Now when I click again, it's going to turn green, and the next one will appear, and so on. And that produces a nice effect. And if you were wondering what transition I had used on that, that was the pan transition. All right, I hope that this was really helpful for you to review how to do these kind of complicated things. I also hope that it was really helpful for you Mac people to get to see it on a Mac. If you have any questions, just let me know.